This is JJ Humphrey, and I am with Bobby Cleveland, and we have Elephant in the Room. Today we've got a special guest, really good friend of mine, Morgan Hobson. Now, here's what's funny. This is the way politics ought to run. Me and Morgan, we ran against each other the first year that I ran for House of Representatives, and Morgan ran in that same race. Got to be good friends in that, and we have just continued to be good friends, and he has helped me with legislation, tried to do good legislation. But one of the things that Morgan really, really knows really well is the social media platforms. Morgan also has experience in military, and he has a lot of knowledge through that. And so he's just a guy that I love to keep in touch with, talk with, and we tried to pass some stuff on social media. And so we've been talking about TikTok. And Morgan, you were telling me the other day that TikTok really has targeted our youth on suicide. So can you explain what you were telling me the other day about that?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me here. Basically, what there was a study that came out. I was watching the Vice show, and then they referenced the study that shows that within 10 minutes of a new account with a 13-year-old or below starting the account, it already starts pushing suicide and violent videos on them. So we can correlate that. We already know that from 2013 to current, we've had an exponential growth in suicide attempts by children. Uh, so what we know now is the algorithms that they're implementing are actually targeting the children. It's not a debate anymore. There's studies on it. So we know that they're targeting the children with negative behaviors, with negative videos, with violent videos, and they're influencing them to take suicide into their own hands. It's just an unhealthy application.
Well, Morgan, also, one of the things, just so our listeners know, a lot of people may not realize that TikTok is ran by China. So, can you explain how that works?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So TikTok is based out of China. ByteDance is the parent company. If you remember back when Trump was president, he tried to do an intervention so that they could keep it because they were controlling it. Because at that time, Skinner box algorithms, which are the algorithms they're running, it's basically an addiction, right? It's just isn't it? It's actually a little bit more addictive to them because children, especially young children, they really want to have that peer reflection. They want peers to approve them. So it really hits on them because they don't have that upper ability to think, right? So what happens is China through ByteDance, they access and control everything that comes out on TikTok in the US. That Department of Defense has already released and had multiple hearings in the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I mean we could just go through the whole list, right? It's a big deal, and that's why they're trying to ban TikTok from government phones, is because the CCP can use that and they can spy on every person that has that. They have unlimited access. Now, it's not, a lot of people think that they have access just to your phone. That's not the way it works. They have access to every single Wi-Fi that you connect to. So if you connect to a Wi-Fi, they can gather intel on anything that's on that Wi-Fi that's there. So there's tons of trade secrets, everything that it can be used to gain access.
Now, when I watched that hearing just the other day, uh, the guy that I guess he's the chairman of the board there of TikTok, he denied all that. Now,
Well,
why would that guy lie?
the reason that he would have to lie is he has a very good job that pays him a lot, but it's irrelevant what he says because ByteDance and the laws in China require that they have to absolutely 100% give all data to them. The data is accessed by ByteDance. There's been multiple things that have proven that there has been access and data transfers between database centers in the United States and database centers in China. That's 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 political posturing or game posturing where he's trying to make it look good just because he wants to get that soundbite out there. You also probably noticed that they gathered all the TikTok influencers and had them out there where they're trying because people make money off of it. You got people that are making a livelihood off of it, but you don't want communist China having access to be able to hack your children's brain and give them bad behaviors.
Well, Morgan, just like on Benadryl, like having a Benadryl challenge or these challenges that they're trying to get. Like if Bob's watching TikTok and they're challenging him to take more Benadryl or things like that, that can be very harmful. Whether it's Tide Pods, these deals of laundry soap that they're eating. So again, they're encouraging not just suicidal behavior, but behavior that would encourage, whether it be sexual, whether it be transgender. Am I correct in saying they're really one of the things behind pushing this transgender movement?
Well, I would say that all social media has trends, right? Even before TikTok became big, you had Instagram and other ones that they would have challenges. The issue is that these are pushed. CCP has the ability to push a button and change what everyone sees in TikTok. So Xi Jinping can decide that he wants Americans to do X, and all he has to do is go to ByteDance, which owns it, and tell them, hey, I want you to make it to where Americans have a challenge where they dance around in their backyard, right? And he can do that. He has control over these people because they're addicted to it. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does make perfect sense.
Yeah.
Now, JJ may not believe this, but I do little research when we have our show to try to look things up and learn, especially on this particular subject, because I knew the name, but I didn't know anything about it. That it was, I heard it was from China, but that's about as much as I knew. And then I started reading about one of the things, these different things they do on there and how kids are dying, committing suicide. The blackout challenge.
Well, I know we're focused on the kids and the suicide, but there's a lot of things that are going on with TikTok that people aren't really privy to. TikTok is facilitating the human trafficking of children in and out of the country. TikTok is facilitating the movement of fentanyl and the movement of drugs to children and throughout the country. The cartel uses it. Not only does the cartel use TikTok, but China makes the fentanyl in China, ships it to the cartel, and the cartel ships it across the U.S. This is an attack that is very similar to what the opium wars were back in China and Britain, but now China's using it on the United States.
We actually had so me and Bob do another program on DOC issues. OCP Live is what that was called. We actually had the director, Donnie Anderson of OBN, Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, on Friday, and he was talking about the identical thing that you're talking about, where they send all the precursors to Mexico to these cartels, and that they then in turn use this fentanyl because it's just astronomically cheap, and then they can put it into all the drugs, mainly methamphetamines, a big one we see here in Oklahoma, but they put it in lots of drugs. I know a guy, one of the guys I had in drug court that OD'd, and he was on ecstasy, and it actually had fentanyl in pill form. They had actually made ecstasy pills with fentanyl. So this fentanyl is being put in all kinds of drugs, illicit drugs, illegal drugs that normally wouldn't have that in there, but it's very addictive. So it creates a return business, and it's real cheap. And so it just makes cheap return business. So it's really, when you're saying that they're not only targeting us through that, but they're also using these addictive behaviors through social media and through TikTok to enhance that. It's just unbelievable. And I don't know about you guys, but when do we have to say that China has declared war on the United States?
I would say that likely should have occurred around the time that they started letting people travel out of Wuhan and they withheld PPE. I would say that once that happened, we had to realize that their activities were hostile.
Morgan, and that's so people understand, you're talking about when COVID first became known, and that China actually shut off transportation in China, did not allow anybody to travel in China, but they allowed everybody to leave Wuhan and to go to other foreign countries to spread this virus. So they attacked all the world, especially America, and then they bought up all of the medical devices, whether it's respirators, gloves, etc., masks, and they held on to that till it got way expensive, so they could turn around and sell it back at an astronomical, price.
And they also used it for blackmail. They used it for blackmail for political favors to gain standing and put a few bases in a few different places, and along with working with the Russians to be able to run through they ran through the English Channel. They disrupted some trade, and at one point, Germany and France and England were blaming one another for shipments being lost. They thought somebody had stole here or there, but they went. This is more than likely, not more than likely, maybe, right? I think the most logical thing at this point, what we know that part came from a laboratory. Like there's no doubt the CGG dimers have already been proven on that there's plenty of testimony before the House. We had major experts that came in, and that's not really debatable unless somebody's still trying to get research funding from China. Then they're going to be against it because that's what's paying their bills. But the science is there. The problem is we try to be too nice. We try to be too understanding. It's okay for us to want to be helpful and stuff, but if someone keeps attacking you and they keep hurting you, at some point you got to push them. You got to push them back, and you got to get your stance. But we're not doing that right now.
Well, not only that, but people, I don't think, Morgan, realize how much this social media impacts. And so, for instance, just what we're talking about, if you'll remember, hydroxychloroquine was a drug that could be used to address these issues. And yet they went out, and any doctor that even had the audacity to stand up and say that hydroxychloroquine was a drug that, you remember, they just attacked them. These masks, I mean, even though we had people come out and say the masks are ineffective, all of a sudden, if you're not wearing a mask, and if you come on there on social media and said anything, I actually come out way early. In fact, right after this, I wrote an article saying just early on that China had declared war on us economically and biologically, that COVID was a biological attack, and that they were destroying our economics when we went down to shut down and all this. That's when we began to have real problems. And again, if you got on social media and said anything like that, my gosh, man, all over the United States, I was attacked. Seattle, California, and New York, you name it.
Yeah, you're racist. You're racist. You can't say anything bad against China or anything. But that's another thing. We have to understand that China has its tentacles and its money in our entire society. If you look, I mean, in Oklahoma alone, they're buying up all kinds of land. You get that money, it's a communist party. That
4,000 acres.
Exactly. It's coming in. If you look at, let's say, for example, all right, if you look at Top Gun, right? Let's look at the Top Gun. They were able to get the Taiwan flag censored out of an American military movie because they have that much control over Hollywood. You look at if you want to look and see what really happens, go look at Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC. Look at who controls the funding that pays their payroll.
China or Soros?
Well, China has at least a 35 to 40% stake in the payrolls that come out of all these news agencies. Because remember,
Bob,
corporations.
Bob, I just want to tell you on that land deal. I've actually, Bullard has got a deal with me, and we're actually trying to make it to where foreign, and it's already a federal law that in 6 states that they can't own land. I don't know why everybody's ignoring that, but we're actually writing a law in Oklahoma that a foreign government can't purchase land in Oklahoma.
Is that this session?
Yeah, he's already passed it out of the Senate, and I've got it in the House.
Okay.
In fact, I think Can't remember if I'm presenting that Monday, but I've already requested a hearing on it.
Okay. Well, I got a question. Is there a billion people on TikTok?
Um, to get the numbers from any of the accurate numbers, they're going to inflate them. So I would say there's probably close to a billion, but the numbers there's a lot of bots, right? So it doesn't matter what internet or anything you go to, there's always going to be bots. That's one of the reasons why Elon Musk bought Twitter, is he wanted to get rid of a lot of the bots, and I think that was why he did his blue check thing, where he wants people to pay a subscription so he can guarantee that that's a human and not just some programs running on a computer.
Yeah. Well, here I got a question that bugged me last night. I started reading this this morning. All the people that I see on here, pages that I went to, were groups and organizations that I oppose. That's liberal organizations that supports anything liberal, anything China has, anything they can do to our country. There's a bunch of socialists, CNN. So why would I want to believe them with what they're saying when they say so many other things that's not true?
Well, in America, we've got this bell curve. Well, everywhere you have a bell curve of population: 10% extreme on the left, 10% extreme on the right, and about 80%, is usually the silent majority in the middle. And usually, when you look at something and it's controlled by China, right, it's usually going to pan out to be a bad thing for America because they're our number one competitor. But they're a hostile group. Those people, the majority of people, are very reasonable. And even though they may watch that, or they may be on there, there's certain things that are just right no matter what, right? And even if you take all the political movements from either side out, the majority of all of humanity will agree that children should be protected. And that's more than likely why everyone is on this, because as adults, people can be adults to get on it. If they want to do that, that's going to be their own prerogative. But for children, they're vulnerable. Their brains aren't completely developed. We don't allow children to drink alcohol because it has an effect on the brain and the development. We don't allow children to smoke crack because it has an effect on the brain. They're teratogenic effects that occur, right? That's just like if you have a mother that's smoking a bunch of, say, meth or something like that, and then she's got a baby that's born, usually they're going to remove the child's born addicted. Well, what we're doing is we're allowing for our kids to smoke cigarettes and smoke crack and do heroin, but we're just doing it in a digital format. And just because we look at it, we don't let children go to the casino and gamble. How old do you have to be to gamble?
21.
21, right? And the Gaming Commission regulates those gambling codes, right? Because they're addictive codes. But we do not regulate social media, and they're using the exact same algorithms, only more effectively. It's way more effective because they have the social peer pressure aspect of it as well. There's not a child that goes to school that, before we didn't, phones weren't such a big deal, but now it's actually embedded as part of the culture. So for the kids, if they don't have a phone, they're an outcast. If they're not part of the app that's popular, they're really an outcast because they're cut out of the loop.
So what if TikTok stopped doing these various things that could kill you, for like holding your breath or taking Tylenol or whatever? What if they quit doing that, and which attacks the kids? Mm-hmm. What would it be like then? Would they still be a menace?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot more things occurring than what we're aware of. It's just most people focus because we see what's happening with children. I don't think there's a rational person in the United States that doesn't see what's going on with the population of children in our country and realizing that there's some major mental health issues. Now, that could stem back from a whole bunch of different things, but it's not just TikTok. Like Justin had said earlier, we had worked on a bill because when we first identified these Skinner box algorithms, they're unhealthy. It's an addictive substance, and we're giving it to children. It was Facebook, it was Twitter, it was all the American companies, right? And we don't want the American companies to be doing that to children, but we definitely do not want China to do it. Because if you go to China and use their version of TikTok, it's going to show you science projects. It's going to show you all types of building and character building videos that help make you a better citizen, right? They don't, and even with that one, they limit it to 1 hour for a child. Why? Because they know it's detrimental.
Do they allow Facebook over there? Our Facebook?
No, we don't get to have any. All of American stuff is cut out from over there.
So they can do that over here.
Hey, Morgan, just so people know, when you're talking about a Skinner box, that's not an actual device. That's a set of psychological tools that they have found to know how to get people addicted to certain behaviors. And so it's a psychological devices, psychological tools that they use to addict people. One of the things that I know I found fascinating the other day when me and you were talking is that you were talking about how that they gauge from the pupils that what if I'm sitting there watching something, if something excites me or gets me that I find appealing, that my pupils dilate and they can tell. And so they're able to look at knowing what things are addictive, and just using this phone over and over and over is what you're talking about becomes addictive behavior, whether it's China or whether it's American companies. If you're getting addictive behavior and they're data mining, which means every bit of the information that you're getting, and again, you were talking a while ago, it can jump onto Wi-Fi. So it's not just what I have on my phone, it's whatever I've got, computer, Wi-Fi around me. Mm-hmm. All of my information is going to this company. And like Bob said a while ago, he well, hey, I think it's going to rain. I might want to buy an umbrella. Bam, up here comes all these commercials. Here's an umbrella, here's an umbrella, here's an umbrella. Because guess what? They're capturing all that like we were talking about a while ago. And so, again, I think people need to be realizing that this is a huge profit, because a lot of people don't see, well, what do they get from this? How are they making any money? But they're making huge money. They're addicting people. The behavior, and again, the social type behavior is always being woven into these things. Like you say, they won't let it go in China, but they're going to talk about transgender, gays. They're going to push that down on our kids, violent behavior, all of these types of behavior that we are seeing our moral compass eroded, our moral values here in America have been eroded. And I would say social media is a huge, huge part of that erosion. And so would you not agree with that? I got every bit of that right, didn't I, Morgan?
What I would say is on the B.F. Skinner box, you would want to research B.F. Skinner and research his operant conditioning. And have you ever touched a car door and it shocked you?
Yeah.
Okay. After a while, when you touch that car door and it shocks you, your behavior changes. You don't touch it. You might kick it with your foot or something like that, right? Okay. Well, that's basically what's occurring. What's occurring is they're using the TikTok, or Facebook does it too, and so does Twitter. They all do it. It's just, who do you want in control of what's going on, right? Do you want a hostile enemy in control of it, or do you want, a person, right? Exactly.
Yeah, neither. How about neither?
But yes, it's not just the pupils. It can be a facial expression. There's facial recognition technology that is used over there, part of their social credit system, which is owned by ByteDance. So ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, has the social credit system set up. And when they look at you and you pull up that app and you're looking at it, guess what? They're taking all of those data points and they have those so that they can see, well, what kind of behavior? Let's look at the effect that it's had, right? Now, I can't narrow down and say that it just came from TikTok, but I would say that social media has had a mass effect on the change in our population that identifies as transgender. Because you don't go from a population that since the beginning of time has been less than 1% of the population to being over 20% of the population reported, right? So more than likely what's happening is they are integrating this, because what is, if you have somebody that's less than 1% of the population in an inclusive society, what's going to cause more anger, frustration, feeling like you're not part of things, right? People are upset. People don't like seeing that stuff on there. That bothers them. That's not normal for them. So what they're trying to do is the same thing that happened before World War II. What did the Germans and what did the Japanese and what did Mussolini do? They put as much propaganda out as they could. They tried to make people think that freedom was bad and that everything was just, it wasn't worth it, right? And that's what they're doing now. When they say they want to build a new world order, I mean, that's not me saying it. Xi Jinping and Putin have said it many, many, many times that they are going to build a new world order.
Some of our own people have said that, and when you hear that, that ought to worry you. When you look at our economic structures right now, guess what? That's what it's moving to. And if you study that, it ought to be concerning to everyone. And I would say probably one of the biggest platforms out there, social media, pushing, and whether it's when you're talking about propaganda. We're now finding out that, hey, they knew and they were in concert with the FBI to shut down the Hunter Biden stories and various other stories that when you're seeing nobody reports on one issue and then here comes something against Trump and my gosh, every news station has got it, carrying it, But if you see something positive, you get it maybe on 2 or 3 networks. And then trying to shut down networks that are promoting those kind of stories. And again, we're seeing them censored and shut down. So again, you're seeing the propaganda, the social media, the media, and it's by itself. And again, like you say, it's all being influenced by China and, a couple of other players in there. But it's pretty scary stuff.
Basically BRICS. Like if you just look at BRICS, the BRICS, they're trying to supplant the US dollar. They've been trying to do it for a long time. But unfortunately, we're in a position where we have a leader who is not mentally in a position to be there. I mean, he's a cardboard cutout president. I'm sorry, but I mean, it's like if I wanted to say, hey, look, this is the president, here it is. I've never in my life, 41, right? Not super old, but I've never in my life seen a president that wasn't in command. None of them. I've never seen one that was like, well, where do I go? What do I do? And they look lost and they lose themselves. Now, a lot of people don't realize Joe Biden's had 2 brain surgeries, 2. Like, that's a hard thing to recover from, but to be at his age and to have had 2 brain surgeries, there's a lot of concern there.
Bob, in your lifetime, you ever seen anybody as bad as Biden?
No, not at all. Not even close. And I happen to be almost 100 years old, so I go back.
That's why I asked Bob. I wasn't going to say that, but I was.
Well, what other countries have banned TikTok?
Well, I don't know of any countries that have. I think there's a lot of countries that want to, but I think there's there may be some out there, but I'm not aware of it.
Well, okay, then. Okay, Biden, he's known to be taking money from China. Why all of a sudden is he for getting rid of TikTok?
Well, I think he's getting a lot of pressure, and I think a lot of that pressure is going to be coming from the Department of Defense. The Armed Services Committee, the Intel Committee has had so many reports, at least like 4 or 5 different reports that have come out, and it's been like, hey, this is being utilized against us. We need to make some changes. Because if you're on a government phone, and let's say you work for the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Transportation, then I can know where things are being shipped because I have access to the computer system that it has access to. I can know what's going on. Like take for example, look at what's happened in Ohio, right? We had the Palestine chemicals that got spilled, right?
Right.
Then you look about, I think it's like 12 or 15, maybe 20 miles over, you had a steel mill that got blown up. Then you look up a little bit north and you have these strategic things that are taking place because a lot of people aren't looking at the worldwide geopolitics of it. What's the number one thing that is needed for modern warfare? Silicate chips, computer chips, high tech, 2 nanogram or not nanogram, two nano silicate chips, and those are built in Taiwan, right? Well, we're building a factory in Ohio. We're trying to build one that's going to be a 2, right? Most are like 4, 6, or 8, but 2 is like the top of the line. We're trying to build one there, and it's just really weird that like the things that like the steel that's needed for the local plant that gets blown up. That's sabotage. You have the chemicals that are used to make the clean room, they get spilled out over on the railway, so they're not going to want that passing through. There's a whole lot of things and things that are moving. Look at Ukraine and Kharkiv. Ukraine produces 90% of the silicate grade neon. 90% of the world's silicate grade neon comes from Ukraine. So if that gets cut off, and then they take it, if Russia gets that, and then China gets Taiwan, right? How are we going to resupply without our own plant? How are we going to resupply our smart weapons? We're not.
Well,
that's kind of scary when you start talking and putting it in perspective like that. That there's a lot more going on here than just a couple of kids eating Tide Pods, you know.
Well, it's the reality of the world and world history. You got to think when you look at a nation, you have to think of it like an individual, right? And they have a personality, and their personality is made up of the behaviors of their citizenship, right? So always throughout history, whether it was the Romans, whether it was the Greeks, whether it was the Persians, there's always going to be somebody that comes in and topples them over if people aren't paying attention to what's going on. And right now, Russia and China and Iran and North Korea and a few others, they're playing chess. We understand that Saudi Arabia has just agreed to start doing trade with oil in the yuan, right? That's the end of the petrodollar. That's the last U.S. superpower, is the petrodollar. So you've got these banks that have collapsed. Those banks didn't collapse. They didn't collapse so much. Yes, there was a little bit. It was because we did free money. They made monopoly money. They did MMT. Modern monetary theory in a fiat system is the same as it's been since the Qin dynasty 5,000 years ago. It doesn't change. If you print too much, you create inflation, right? Those bonds that SVB that they went under on, those are U.S. Treasury bonds. The reason that they went under is because when the interest rates go up, the value of the bonds go down, which means that they were unable to clear their depositors. There's a big issue coming. And if China and everybody, if they do this, if the BRICS, if they're successful and we don't intervene, what'll happen is people will start ditching the dollar. When they ditch the dollar, those U.S. Treasuries will come back to the United States, and then you'll have inflation on a much larger scale than what people realize.
Now, if you talk about that, what about everybody that stays in the stock market? What's going to happen? What's going to happen to that?
With the stock market?
Yeah, with that money. I mean, like I got a lot of Walmart stock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's going to be worthless?
Well, it very well could be. I hope not, but I would tell anybody to research Ray Dalio. He has some great videos, but he's got a great book, right? It's The Rise and Fall of Empires. And he went all the way back. I mean, I don't know, I think he did 13 different empires that had the world reserve currency like the United States, right? And it's a cycle. It's a cycle of what happens. The only way that you can stop the cycle, because we're headed towards a war. Like, there's no doubt, if you look at that cycle of money, you think Americans are going to be like, hey, we want to be broke now. We're going to give up all our wealth and our military because China is going to become, no, they're going to want to fight for it, right? I know I am. Are you not? I'd want to fight to keep my children in a good life. Well, when that happens, you're going to have a financial issue and a geopolitical issue with the military. So you're going to have to give. One's going to have to give, or the other's going to have to give. So we have a very short window right now of which that we can make certain moves so that we can set ourselves up, because they may have already made their decision, right? Let's be frankly honest. In 2005, the defense minister of China gave a speech about using coronavirus to attack the United States to weaken it so that they could economically overtake us. That's a speech. You can go back and look at the speech. That was a public thing that was done. So we know that in the CCP, they have been planning this type of stuff for quite some time. Now, whether or not that's what happened, it could be a lab leak that occurred because we were sending stuff over. Dr. Ebright, I've shared some of his stuff when it first came out. When I talked to him, he was telling me that, he thinks it's a lab leak, right? And then whenever you look at I've got some videos I can send to you, but when you look at the testimony that happened, they can take this. Do you guys know what CRISPR is? Okay.
No.
CRISPR is how you genetically alter genes, right? So you can get under a microscope, and let's say that you've got an XY sequence and an XX sequence, and I want to take the 202nd allele. Well, with CRISPR, I can do a CGG dimer, and I can cut that gene out and put another one in, right? That's what they were doing in that laboratory. If you look at the report, that's exactly what they were doing. And then when you look at the testimony under the origins of coronavirus for the House, Dr. Ray, I can't remember his first name right now. He's he's one of the most published, and he's got so many inventions. He's super, super smart. And he proves that they took and cut it because you can see the CGG dimer. So you can see it. It occurs in nature, but not where it would infect humans like that. Does that make sense?
It does. Hey, Morgan, so that people know kind of why you know so much about this. You were actually in the military. You were actually exposed to some chemicals in which you've had a lot of medical issues, and you have had to go through lots of medical procedures, and you've had to talk to. So some of these people that you're talking to are in the Pentagon, and you're on a few short list of being able to sue over the chemicals you were exposed to, correct?
Oh, very, very much so. So basically, the way I got connected with Dr. Ebright, he's the molecular engineer for Rutgers University. He runs that lab up there. When I got sick in 2017, and I had some long-term effects from chemical weapons during OIF-1. And at that point, I ended up going to Walter Reed in the Army Public Health Center. And then that's how I got connected with all these. That was the initial, they're like, hey, you need to talk to this guy. He's an expert in this molecule or this weapon. You need to talk to this one here. So we started making connections. Like right now, I'm working with the RISC Center, the War-Related Injury and Illness Service Center out of Washington, D.C. They specialize in nuclear, biological, and chemical. We're trying to develop some different tests and things so that we can help people out. There's a lot of things going on with that. But yes, I was military police when I was in the Army. 88 Mike, truck driver as well. I've also taught psychology, sociology, criminal justice at the collegiate level for 13 years now. So I'm very, very much into this stuff.
Well, have you been following the Congress where they've been having these hearings on TikTok?
Yes.
Does it look like that we are going to be able to ban that, or we're not? Do you have a feeling one way or the other?
I don't have a feeling one way or the other yet, because I think the issue that they're going to run into is they're going to run into a lot of, like they did, where a lot of politicians right now, they are very much motivated by the social media, right? And because TikTok has the highest following and it has a connection with everyone, that gives China the ability to be able to put a lot of pressure on the politicians to sway their vote.
How long has TikTok been in the United States?
I want to say it was like 2013. I'm not 100% on that. I, my understanding of TikTok is more of the, I'm gonna say, the code level than what was going on with the
So they're
others.
relatively new
Oh
to,
yeah, yeah.
to have that.
They're
They've grown
definitely new.
substantially then.
Yeah, they're definitely new. I'd have to look that up, but let me see. I want to say it was 2013. I could be wrong. Maybe.
We, COVID, one of the things COVID did, so it had some negative effects, lots of negative effects, but it did have some positive effects. And one of the things it did, it woke parents up to what's going on in school, what their kids are being exposed to, what a lot of these schools are doing, teaching some of the books that are in school. And so I think when we're talking about, like Bob a while ago was talking about, how can liberals and how can conservatives all agree that some of this is bad? I think that parents, and again, some of the liberals back what some of the teachings are in colleges and high schools and grade school, but most of your parents don't want their kids being exposed to, transgender teachings, gay or lesbian books that are a how-to. Most of your parents don't want that kind of exposure to their children, no matter who they are.
Well, I agree I agree that most parents, just statistically, if we were to look at it statistically, if you go back, I don't know, if we just go back 5 years, we go back 5 years before COVID, right? If you go back and you look statistically, less than 1% of the population is transgender, reported transgender, right? Now that there could be some issues in statistics because people wouldn't want to report, or they may feel like they want. But to have such a significant jump it definitely implies there's a social contagion, and that it's being fed like a fire, for this to occur. Now, when you look at, let's say, for example, gender affirming care, right? It's a big hot topic issue. But however, the only longitudinal study that they had was in 2019, that had showed that there was a chance of reducing suicide rates with kids, by doing the gender affirming care. And that really took off in California. They started doing the different things. Other than that, there's no long-term studies of the consequences. Well, after review of the data, they realized the data was wrong, the analysis was incorrect, and so they had to basically revise the findings of the study that started this whole thing. Well, other than that, you're just experimenting on kids. I mean, that's just the reality. You can't give off-label use. You can't do all these different things. Look, it doesn't matter what your belief system is. If it's LGBTQ, or if it's Muslim, if it's whatever it is, if it's Christian, whatever view you have, we have laws in 40 states that make it illegal to mutilate the genital of children. In 40 states, it's a felony. It doesn't matter. You can't be a religious person and say, well, this is my belief system, I want to do that. We can't allow the belief system of LGBT to mutilate children either. Like, we can't give one set of rules because it's politically correct for another and not for the rest.
We're doing that.
Well, what's sad, I've researched some of this. Bob, I do a little research too. Okay. But I've researched it, and I forget what the number was, but it's like 80% of the kids who experience transgender issues will grow out of that. If you leave them alone, they'll grow out of that. So why would you go in, if you said you had an 80% cure rate, why would you go in and mutilate all these children, for this 20% or 15, whatever it was? It's insane. Hey, I do want to say something though, Morgan, that I've noticed while we're talking. We were talking a while ago how that you can watch the eyes dilate and that you can watch the facial features. A while ago, when you were talking about that bell curve, that there's 10 on this side, 10 on, and you said 10 conservative. I watched Bob's face and he lit up when you said that 10% conservative. I think I identify far right 10%. What do you think?
Well, this is the thing. We're all Americans, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're on the left. Doesn't matter if you're on the right. I may not agree with you or whatever, but we're all Americans. We all want the Constitution and the Bill of Rights for every citizen. And if we move to that direction, history shows that we'll be okay. But if we continue on the path where we're moving away from it, where they're moving towards equity and away from equality, when we're moving away from a meritocracy, we're moving more to race-based scenarios and systems of government, the only thing that causes is division. Like we have to really focus on the founding fathers and the way our country was set up. And we have to really, I mean, let's think about this. Regardless of what people think about the vaccination, I know there's a lot of people that are upset about the vaccine here and there. COVID was killing the world. I mean, it was. We had a death rate that was outrageous. Now, the United States, without any, we basically did the Manhattan Project in Operation Warp Speed. And it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. The reality is Operation Warp Speed will go down in history as just the same way as the Manhattan Project did, because it was such a massive undertaking. And we came up with the only effective vaccinations that work. Now, granted, those vaccines have a lot of side effects with myocarditis and everything. However, we didn't have anything. We didn't have any option. And it wasn't until 72, 73 days, the data shows, after we started implementing the vaccination, right? And that's something Trump doesn't get a lot of credit for. He's the one that operated and oversaw Operation Warp Speed. He should definitely get credit for that. 72, 73 days afterwards, and I'm not looking at the data right now, so I have to go back. That was when we started gaining herd immunity and our death rates just plummeted. We did that. The United States saved the world again. We did it in World War I. We did it in World War II. We did it in World War coronavirus, or whatever you want to call it. That's what we did.
Well, what we had, though, we had people dying that they, no matter what they died of, it was the virus.
Oh, absolutely. We absolutely had issues in reporting, and you had a lot of different medical facilities that were wanting to get more money, so they would make it, they would make it this way.
They were getting paid for anybody that died.
Numbers for sure, but I'm talking worldwide. If you look worldwide at the amount of deaths that were coming in, right? Yeah. After we hit that herd immunity stuff, the death rates dropped. We're the only ones that have a vaccination that works. Now, granted, our vaccines are not super safe, because they're experimental. Let's be honest, they're experimental. However, we were going up against a lab-created virus that has CGT dimers that had been made specifically to attack the human genome.
Well, it just always shocked me how Biden went on there, and you're not going to force me to take a vaccine when it was Trump, and then as soon as he was in charge, you're going to be forced. Everybody's going to take. And if you ain't, we're going to round you up, put you in a camp or something, that kind of language. It just always blows my mind how Trump never gets credit for the great things that he does and how they go after, and then just reverse and back up and say the exact opposite of what they were saying before they were in power. And so this guy is... he's trouble, and like you say, I don't believe that he's even running a show. He's, the lights are on, but nobody's home type deal. And the guy in the pajamas is him, and some friends are probably the ones running the show.
Let me ask you a question. What is the purpose of TikTok, in your opinion? Is it to attack the kids of the youngsters of our country? Is that what it's all about?
Oh, absolutely. More than just that, we have to remember that China has its own culture, right? They're a civilization culture. We're not. We're individual. They believe that the civilization is more important than the individual. We believe the individual is more important. It's a whole cultural difference. And for them, they look at things on a long-term, usually 100-year plan, right? So if you look at what they're doing, they try to do things over time incrementally, like a push, nudge, nudge, right? So what they've done is they've come in and they've infiltrated basically every part of our society. Remember, 40 years ago, there was a hole in the mud. 40 years ago, China was, I mean, you had some people on the East Coast, and that was basically about it. It was basically just mud roads everywhere. But they strategically came in, and if you look, they stole. We had our, what was it, GE? They took GE aerospace technology, which was allowed to be sold off to them. It never should have, but it did. Then they started getting fifth generation fighters. It's just incrementally they come in and they do bit by bit. I think we have to admit that the idea that China is going to become more like the West is a flawed one. It's not going to happen.
Well, I was there 40 years ago.
Mhm.
I've been going there for a number of years. And it was really interesting where what they do is they set up there's so many people. They got so many people.
Oh, yeah.
And in the big towns, the city that I was at, Guangzhou, I think they had like 10 million people. It was 20 million. And so they have people sweeping the roads. They don't have, like we have the machine that comes down there. They were sweeping. They had to have jobs for everybody. But they go out in the country and you get out in the country, say you got 2 miles from any big city and you won't see anything else. They have them there as everybody has to work in the big city. They go in there and stay. But then you work for so long, and then they have I think it's once or twice a year, they shut down and everybody goes home. They're trying to come back, and they come back, go to work. Well, they found out that really wasn't working. So they started setting up these industrial plants out in the country. And then they were forcing people to live in that area to work at that plant. And it was interesting how it changed. It could change from 1 year that I was there. I'd go back, and it was just tremendously a lot of difference. I could go in a car from Guangzhou and all of a sudden go to a town that's 80 miles away. I may not see another car once we get within, a mile or 2 miles outside of Guangzhou, and not see another car till we get to where we're going. Then all of a sudden, you start seeing more and more cars. So how it's changed. Used to, what I found interesting is my friend who I was in business with there, he lived in a beautiful apartment, marble floors. I mean, it was beautiful. It was about at least 20 stories, but it was nice. But you know what they did? They hung their underwear, hung all their clothes out on the patio. Little deal they had their patio, hung it out. They couldn't have enough. They did not have enough electricity to run dryers, so they were building a dam, huge dam.
It's the world's largest dam now.
Yeah, and they finally got it built. Now they got dryers, but you couldn't have air conditioning.
And it's they've progressed a lot, and they've progressed on the backs of America. The entire world has progressed. I mean, if we look at basically starting after World War II, when we implemented the Marshall Plan, we basically rebuilt all of Europe. We built up all of the world. None of the economic systems that exist today exist without the United States Navy.
Right.
If the United States Navy did not secure the trade lanes, right, then no state, no country could do what we do. It's just like Rome. Like the U.S. is the neural network of the world, of the globe. We have more infrastructure for all of the processing power here in the United States. However, we do have people that are trying to supplant us, and they're trying to break it up, and they want a multipolar or a unipolar different world order. There's so many different versions of it. We just have to look at it as, it doesn't matter what it is. If we go to the Constitution and we go to the Bill of Rights, and then we make sure that every adult citizen, right, whether we agree with them or not, like I'm personally not for, I'm not a big supporter of a transgender person, right? That's not personally. However, if they're an adult and they want to live that life, I would be willing to fight and die for them to have that right, because I want the person who's on the other end of that spectrum to be able to feel and do the same way, because that's the key of being an American.
Real quick, what do you think your chances are of Congress actually doing away with TikTok? Percentage wise, just guess.
Percentage wise, I would say that I would say that it's probably Congress probably won't do it. We're probably at like 20-25% with Congress. I think what's going to force it is the military will force it. It will be a forced operational security thing that has to be done.
I'll tell you what, Morgan. A lot of things that I'm seeing, we're coming back to states. If I believe if the United States stays together, stays functional, stays strong, it'll be because the states have exercised their states' rights and brought our country back. So I think few people realize how strong our local governments are and how important it is to get behind and pick the right candidates, vet your candidates, understand. Hey, one question I have on social media, would you not agree that they're using it to attack every aspect? So like the law and order right now, the confidence in our law and order, of course, some of that is we've seen the corrupt FBI, we've seen the corrupt DOJ, so that's eroding confidence. But here we have social platforms, social media that also go out and promote that cops are bad, that police are bad, law enforcement's bad. So when you erode the law and order away from the United States, if people don't have that, that's a big, big part of our freedom, is to know that we all have equal justice.
And absolutely. What it is a systematic control. Remember, we're in a psychological warfare, right? The U.S. This is not the first time. Remember, the Nazis they took and basically blew propaganda up because they realized it was an extremely effective tool. Well, what better way to weaken the strongest power in the United States, being the United States, than to diminish trust in government, diminish trust in authority and systems, diminish, you got a lot of people, and you'll see the people that are, you'll see the LGBT, you'll see the African Americans and the Black Lives Matter and all these people, and they say, oh, well, America is so bad, America's this. However, any person that is in any category in the United States, I don't care what category you're at, any citizen, go to another country, right, and try and have the freedoms that you have here. Right. They do not exist. And as we're seeing in Europe right now, because we know Russia's getting ready to break through in Bakhmut. That's going to happen. Like, we're way too little, way too late. They're trying to put 300,000 troops down there in the Poland, but that should have happened when the Intel Committee said that the month after the invasion. We should have already put that hard power there. So Europe, everybody always says, well, in Europe they've got this, and in Europe they've got that because they got this social program, and their socialism works. Democratic socialism. Well, it works because the United States is the defender. If you look at the leader of the Bundeswehr, he come out and said, we stand barehanded. We can get 7 Typhoons in the air and we may have 300 tanks. You look at France, look at what's going on there. They're getting really hit with propaganda right now. You can see where they're having all the protests and everything.
Right.
That's being fed. That's being fed by the enemy. The world is splitting. The world is splitting. It's going to either split peacefully or it's going to split forcefully. That's just the reality. People can be upset about it and you can be mad and you can be angry, but the reality is as Americans, we have to come together as unity or we all lose. Because if America loses, there is no place to go. There is no other freedom spot that you can go to.
Lincoln said, united we stand, divided we fall. If you looked in the Bible, Jesus was the first one who said, house divided against itself can't stand. And that's where we are. If we don't quit playing this divisiveness and get together, we gonna fall.
Absolutely. We need to, in the way I see it, because I'm trying to look at it as an anthropological, sociological, and psychological point, right? Because you have every different facet of your environment, right? It dictates what goes on. That's why they're pushing on the TikTok so hard, is because if I can think about this, How many, when you're around kids next time and they're on TikTok or Facebook or social media or anything like that, have them set their phone behind them, right? And then just send them a text message to the phone and see how long it takes for them to where they have to reach it. And you could tell them that they can't. They've done studies. We know that it raises the stress levels, the hormones. They can control what's going on in the brain. It's like hacking the brain. It's like if I want you to go out and kill somebody, if I give you enough stimuli and I make you angry enough, and then I send you feeds that say, hey, this person is your enemy. And then I send you feeds that says, oh, well, this is what you should do. Violent behavior is what you should do. Well, what happens? Violent behavior explodes. It becomes a social contagion. And that's what's occurring. And the only thing that's going to change anything for the United States is if we seek truth, period. It has to be the truth. It doesn't matter if it falls on the left. It doesn't matter if it falls on the right. We have to seek truth. God is truth. And if we seek truth, all of our problems will go away.
What would you, just in a few words, what would you talk to somebody about who says, "Oh, that's not true. I'm going to keep my TikTok, blah blah blah." What would you say?
Well, I would tell them that if they're an adult, I would tell them, that's a poor decision, and I hope that you change your mind and research more about it. They're free to make whatever choice they want. But if it's a child, if they're talking about that they're given access to a child, I would tell them that they're a child abuser. I would say that if you give access to TikTok to any child under the age of 18, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same as if you gave them heroin, because you're going to have the same negative effects on the development of their brain, because the serotonin levels and the dopamine levels and the way that it affects the brain is no different than the serotonin levels and the dopamine levels of the actual physical drugs. You're still creating a high tolerance, which affects the brain and the development in the way they think.
Well, Morgan, are you from out in Lane area?
Antlers, Oklahoma is where
you're from. Antlers,
just down the road, Bob. That's still God's country.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised at the intelligence that you have there.
Hey, what are you trying to say, Bob?
No, nothing. I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just impressed. I'm really impressed with Morgan. That's I learned a lot. I'm glad you mentioned this, JJ, to have him on.
There's a reason why I stay in contact with him. He's like my smart brother. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I've learned a lot just listening to him, and I appreciate it. I'm glad that. I'm glad you have a friend, JJ.
Bob, I'm gonna tell you what, no joke. And Morgan, I know I love you, man. I really do. And we've stayed good friends over the last 8 years, and I do every time I talk to him. And the other day, when I was talking to him about this, that's what I called you and said, man, we need to have a conversation on this, because it just blows your mind. And we hadn't even started touching on the lawsuit that we were talking about. So, Morgan, we're going to have you come back on, because you just can't do it an hour,
Sure. Morgan, what we did, we tried to put this together, JJ and I. We want to talk about something nobody else will talk about or afraid to talk about.
Well, I'm not afraid to talk about anything, and I've based on basically my life has required me to research many topics for usually 6 to 7 hours a day for the last 13 years. So I have a vast amount of research that had to be forced. You can't teach at a college level and not be up to speed on certain things.
Right.
Well, and I love you on that. Just saying, we hadn't even got into that, but on most college professors these days are really scared to speak out against the things that you're talking about. So being on a college level and still being willing to have a conversation is even more. I don't think people realize just what it takes for you to stand up and have those conversations. So I respect that.
Well, thank you. But this is what it comes down to. What it comes down to is there's a First Amendment of freedom of speech, right? I'm not saying anything. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want anyone to be hurt. The only thing I want to do is help my fellow Americans and my fellow citizens. If someone's upset about that, well, then they're going to have to be upset about that. I didn't go overseas and fight for the freedoms that we have to not express them after I've already fought for them. Just like I wouldn't want you to not express yours. That's why I say earlier that if it wouldn't matter if it was a transgender, if their rights were being stepped on, I would go and stand and fight for them to have their rights, the same as I would on the opposite end of the spectrum. Because to me, we're Americans and we're citizens of this great country. And it doesn't matter what anybody ever says, no one's ever going to change the fact that the United States is the greatest country that has ever existed in the history of
Absolutely.
mankind. Now, there are one thing that we really need to do as citizens. The one thing we really need to do is get involved with our government. We need to get involved. We need to be informed, because if we're wrong on something, we can only gather a certain amount of data. So we can have data and be like, well, this is the conclusion I came on. But I can tell you I could be wrong on everything I've said today. Absolutely. It's possible to do. However, I don't think I am.
Well, we've got to get involved in school board elections, city council elections, everything, and get more involved in. Morgan, are you familiar with Boat Cheetah?
Yes.
How familiar are you with Boat Cheetah?
I mean, I've been there a few times over there by Durant, I believe, correct?
Yeah, that's where my family's from.
Oh, okay.
I still got.
That might explain a few things.
Well,
I still got the family farm.
well, all of us being in Southeast Oklahoma, we bring a different perspective than what you're going to get somewhere else.
No question about that. JJ brings a different perspective. There's just no question about it.
Well, we're going to get a different perspective because Southeast Oklahoma is the poorest area in the country.
Yep.
And is that way for a reason? Like, most people don't realize, but in Dokesville, right outside of Fort Townsend, Oklahoma, is where the Civil War ended. That was where the Civil War ended, right there at the capital of the Choctaws. And what happened is a lot of the slaves and a lot of the indentured servants and a lot of the soldiers that were just done, they just stayed in the area. And then you had the Choctaws, they put more money in than the federal government does. And then the state government looks at it like it's a stepchild. Like they come and try and take the water on the Comanche. They try and there's tons of different things that happen. But JJ's really been out fighting for them.
Bob, that's why when I tell you, and I ain't joking, that we spell poor, and we even say it different. We say Paul. And we spell it with 4 O's. We spell it with 4 O's, not 2 O's.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I'm Choctaw, and I'm very thankful for what the Choctaw Nation does.
They're amazing.
They do so much for the people, the towns, and I know my mother and dad, as they got older, Choctaws did so many things for them and had them give them a chance to tour the countryside and they're just a wonderful.
It'd be nice if our federal government would
take some tips
step up and learn from the Choctaws and what needs to be done, because the Choctaws just do not have the resources to put in for the people down there. Because the reality is Southeast Oklahoma has so many resources and could be developed and is so beautiful. It could be recreational, it could be industrial. There's so many options there because of all the resources. They're just not tapped. Usually one of the big cities wants to grab one little thing and they try and pull it up for them because they've overexpanded past their growth capacity.
Right. Well, if you're not from Southeast Oklahoma and you just lived in Oklahoma City or Tulsa area or somewhere like that, you don't realize how beautiful it is up there. That's why all the people from the Dallas, or not Dallas, from Texas are coming to buy land over there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We got to wrap it up. We're already over about 12, and I got to go haul some cattle into Daisy. Really God's country, Daisy, Oklahoma. So,
yeah.
You want to wrap this up, Bob?
Well, I want to say I thank you very much. It's very informative for me, and I hope it is for our listeners, because this is probably, I'd say, the best thing that we've ever done since we've been doing this, and even on the other programs that we've done, to bring a message out. And I appreciate you, Morgan, for coming on. JJ, as always, I appreciate the work that you do. And if the people really knew what you did, they'd be shocked at how much you do for the people of Oklahoma. And I've been with you. You get calls from all over the state for wanting you to do this, wanting you to do that, investigate this, investigate that. And you know what? You do it. That's the problem. And then you got yourself so busy, you can't hardly take care of your cattle. But I appreciate everybody being here, and we'll just
Well, thank you.
God bless you. I appreciate you.
Back. Thank you for the invite. Just let me know.
We did. Well, God bless you guys, and then we'll sign off there. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.